Hey guys, welcome out to part two of an examination of the King James Version only controversy debate between Nick Sayers and Rob Rowe. So, in the first part, I went through basically my opening statement, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. I think over the years, I've been able um, to put complex things into bite-sized little nuggets, and also just get information that many people might know, and just be able to put it into the public arena. And so, um, yeah, I guess in a way, I'm happy with the direction that my debates are going. Um, I really take my hat off to Donny. He is prolific in his in the amount of debates that he does, or hosts, and also takes part in. He oftentimes just has, Ken Hover sometimes two or three times a week, and then he's doing other things. A lot of the time, I'll just look at my phone and it just says he's live, and it's like, okay, I tune in and just listen for as long as I can at that period of time, and it's good stuff, and I'm really enjoying it. And so I'm seeing it's more and more of a privilege to have done this debate on his channel. So, let's get straight into this. So where we left off last time, there I am smugly going, well, I've won it. And here's Rob going, oh no, this guy actually knows his stuff.
All
And
right, I
whoops,
appreciate that, Nick. With
and I'm going to lose. And so I'm just sort of having a joke there. But what we're going to do, we're going to go through Rob's material, and we're just going to see if there's any validity behind what he was saying. Um, actually, I'm going to change my setting here. Oops, computer's a little bit jumpy today for some reason. Okay, cancel that. Okay, where am I? Sorry about that, guys. I did a video on Mark Ward a few days ago, and I thought I was live streaming, but I actually recorded the whole thing. And then I thought, well, it's probably good I recorded it, because there was a few little bits where I felt like I hadn't really prepared that much, and he was talking about how King James onlyists haven't contributed anything to the field of scholarship, ever, sort of thing. And it's like, it's just sort of befuddling. You sort of there going, well, have they, haven't they? And I was just even looking at Dave Hunt, like he considered himself a Textus Receptus guy, and then he moved more and more towards the King James position until he passed on. But he wrote so much. I mean, he wrote even fictional books. I mean, there's so many people who basically are King James people who have influenced the church in a positive way. And so, but while I was, yeah, the reason I bring that up is I actually recorded the whole thing, and I tried to put it onto a media player, Adobe um, Pro, and edit it, and it was so difficult, like, because you have to go through each part again and again and again. I mean, if I had 10 hours, I would have been able to do it. I just got about 10 minutes into it, and I was like, forget it, let's just upload the thing with mistakes and everything. So I guess I'm just getting a bit more comfortable with just jumping on and saying, hey, how you going, rather than having everything all polished and all the rest of it, because sometimes that's why I don't do things. I think, oh, it's a bit of a labor, but I don't find it a labor to just jump on and just chat. And so, and also too, like even this morning, I'm like, well, I haven't recently listened to Rob's opening statement. So he probably says, 5 or 6 things that maybe I haven't prepared for them. I haven't got those things written down, or maybe I have written them down. They're on my computer somewhere, and I've got a really good answer that I could bring. So what I thought, well, I'll just do it. I'll run through it, and if there's anything I miss, hopefully I remember to do it in the next video. And I think I've just got to keep pushing these out, and eventually I'll get more streamlined. And what I really want to do too is these guys who I'm debating and doing videos about, I'd love to put the information that's brought up about these guys. I'd love to put all that information onto my website. So if someone types in, Mark Ward, there's a whole bunch of articles that show what he's saying. I know that Jeff Riddle's written quite a lot. Taylor DeSoto, these guys have made videos, but it'd be great to have all that information just in one spot, so we can go, hey, well, if you really want to know more, go here, and then people can dive into those rabbit holes. Anyway, I'll adjust the volume here. I'll let Rob say his bit, and we will. Yeah, that's still not working. Anyway, we'll get straight into it.
5 seconds to spare. So I appreciate the opening statement. We've already got questions flying in. So thank you everybody for your questions. Sure to be an audience Q&A, a good audience Q&A. So we're going to now hand it over to Keanu Reeves, Rob Rowe over here, for your 15-minute opening statement. Whenever you're ready, Rob, I'll do the same thing. I'll just give you.
So I just thought I'd point out that when I'm doing these debates, I always have in my mind that I'm going to read through the chat. But the thing is, your opponent's chatting. So it's like having, unless Rob, at times he just waffled on. And so I was able to just sort of skip through the chat. But sometimes there's 15 comments of just nothing. And then someone will write a question. And so it's almost like a distraction. It's like trying to watch Twitter or something. It's in the background. You see James White in his program, he'll have Twitter in the background and he'll be saying something, getting right to the point. He'll talk about Twitter and then he forgets where he's at. And so, especially in a debate, you want to be focused. And so, and I had no idea where Rob was going to go. We had a little bit of chat before this. And I said, look, Rob, I guess, you're probably going to be looking more at the Old Testament, or I'm more of a New Testament guy. And, just had a bit of general chit chat talking about COVID and things like that. And, but yeah, I guess, like I said at the beginning of the last video, it is disappointing to see a guy who's representing Christianity there drinking scotch, and someone sent him a bottle of scotch and he's got the sunnies on. So in other words, it's like this debate isn't important to me. It's a joke. It's like debating about flat Earth. It's not really going to go anywhere, and so it's a bit of a joke. And so, anyway.
Be a kind of a 1-minute warning, and you're good to go. You're good to go.
Cheers, Nick. Cheers, Donnie.
Cheers, man.
Cheers. All right, so I'm going to tackle this issue. I've never really debated this topic publicly like this, but I'm going to engage this with a little bit of common sense and logical thinking, and in light of the fact that there's extensive evangelical scholarship with respect to the underlying Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible text, and as well as the New Testament. Now, Nick obviously has done a lot of homework. As you guys can tell, he's done a lot of homework with respect to the New Testament. Now, I'm someone who holds to, say, the very recent publication, the 20th edition of the Nestle Island Critical Edition, and now they're actually working on the 29th. And there's a lot of readings in there that, quite curiously, is not in the 27th and prior. But Bibles like the English Standard Version will utilize, even back when the 27th edition was around, it was utilizing readings that has now appeared in the 28th. So they're sort of like playing with fire a little bit, wondering if that reading should be the case or not. So that being said, everything.
So I don't really know what he's saying there. I mean, basically he's saying I go with the 28th edition. There's a lot of differences between that and the 27th edition, but there isn't really. There's a lot of footnote variations, but it's pretty much very similar text. But I think he's talking about Jude chapter 1, verse 5, where it changes the word Lord or Kurios to Jesus, Jesus. And so it says Jesus led them out of, and so instead of the Lord led them out, Jesus led them out. And so this appeared first in the ESV, and then later on it's made its way into Greek, into the Greek editions. And so, but that just shows that, see, sometimes these people who are working on the translations, many times there is cross-pollination between them and the guys in Munster. And also Tyndale House guys, like they might say, oh, well, this particular reading is going to be in our next edition. And so, Bible translators, instead of waiting for that next edition, they go, well, we're going to run with it, so. But Rob seems sort of disappointed in that. I mean, I'm disappointed in it because they're changing the word of God. They're putting the name of Jesus there, where the name of Jesus was known after, Matthew chapter 1, when the angel declared, his name shall be called Jesus, and all that. Not, back in the days, Jesus led them out, sort of thing. And so it creates a problem. Peter Gurry said to me that was one of the reasons why it was changed, because it's a harder reading. And, the rules, it's a hard reading, so that must be the true reading. It's really strange. It's a harder reading until it isn't, or until the reading's so hard that it's like, okay, that's stupid. And so, and that's the thing. Yeah, textual criticism is not a science. It's an art. People are just playing with words. They're throwing them around, and they're just saying, well, that seems to fit. And see, sometimes too, that depends on the theology of those people who have changed that. And sometimes it's not until, conservative Christians who, that they know the Word of God, they know theology, they're constantly preaching doctrine, that doctrine is their life, and they're constantly involved with that. When they read these modern versions, they're like, hang on, that might favor a Trinitarian reading, but it destroys this other thing. They're trying to squeeze the Trinity in there when it's not there, or hang on, they're trying to put Jesus in there, and it's that ruins the Old Testament narrative, or that destroys the whole concept of the name of Jesus was only known to, it was first known to Joseph, his stepfather, and so it's destroying that type of narrative. And so, I'm not saying that those things are concrete studies, what I just mentioned. I'm just saying that you can, every verse is like a diamond. It can have 50 different aspects, and you hold it up to the light and you look at it in different ways. And so sometimes these guys from Munster, they're not even Christians, and many times they've just gone through and they're like, well, you're a Christian if you believe in the deity of Christ, the Trinity, and sort of you don't have to believe in an eternal hell, just probably a hell where even if you fade away, you're fine. We all believe in heaven, of course, and and just sort of they've got like 10 things that you have to tick the boxes, and you're a Christian, and so those types of people aren't going to have strong theology. And sometimes I'm amazed when I'm reading through some of their material, like Jan Kranz or people like that, and it's like, doesn't this guy understand that totally destroys this other concept, or it destroys, the whole reason why the Holy Spirit's mentioned there, or the whole reason that Jesus healed someone there, or the reason, or the message of the evangelistic message of that, or because these people aren't into all that. They've got their tick box. They're like, oh, yeah, the Trinity, deity of Christ. We work within that. and we'll try not to go outside of that because that'll upset our money base. You know, that we've got clients out there who want Bibles and they want certain readings, and we'll, you know, we don't want to rock the boat. So if we can even do things in favor of those, of the virgin birth and, you know, Trinity and things like that, we'll do it. You know, I mean, you know, the Unitarian. I basically see the Westcott and Hort text as a Unitarian Bible. So the Textus Receptus and even the Roman Catholic text probably culminated in the Clementine text. I'm pretty sure that's 1592. I'm pretty sure, or 1582. But that's in Latin. So, but they were at loggerheads, you know, between readings and things like that. But those texts are basically sort of both TR type texts. You know what I mean? They're very close to each other when you compare them to the abomination that's happened with Westcott and Hort text. That is just a mess. And so I, there were Unitarians who worked on the text, you know, with Westcott and Hort, and obviously the Bible Society had basically become the Unitarian Bible Society after the Trinitarians left and started the Trinitarian Bible Society. And so I'd see it as like a Unitarian text. So it's almost like the Jehovah's Witnesses have got a hold of the text, and they're like, yeah, we've got our text. Westcott and Hort have published it. A whole bunch of Bibles are being printed on that. They've done, you know, the Nestle all the way through to the 28th one that he's talking about. And but it's still the Unitarian text. You can only polish up a Watchtower magazine so much before it, you know, it's still going to be a Watchtower magazine, you know, sort of thing. So that's why you see James White going, see in John chapter 1 verse 18, you know, it says the only begotten God. That means Jesus is God. This is the strongest verse showing Jesus is God, you know, all this stuff. And it's like, man, these guys are desperate because the Unitarians are gutted. You know, like you used to, my mum used to buy your big loaves of bread, French bread, and they were really long. And we hated the hard crust on the outside, you know, where she would sort of cut slices and put a bit of butter on it, and you sort of have to crunch through that. But the bread inside was so soft, it was like donut. So we would put our fingers in and dig out, you know, the whole, as our little hands would fit halfway through, and she would go to cut it, and all the goodness is gone, you know. And so that's what's happened with the Westcott and Hort text. All the goodness is gone, and they're just happy to see, you know, they try and squeeze, you know, things back into it, but it's a mess. They've been handed a mess, and they're trying to mop it up, and it's like, guys, just go back to the TR. it's just a mess. So anyway, it's just like Rob's sort of befuddled at why they're doing this, and I think the thing is, you know, someone like Rob, he tends to uh, trust scholars. It's just all about scholars and peer-reviewed journals and all this sort of stuff. Where I've realised through my life that some of the best things that I've ever heard have come from people who are even crazy. They say things, and it's like, my goodness, that is gold. You know, that is so true. What an amazing observation. No scientist, no peer-reviewed journal, no credibility, or it just this guy's a nut. But he just said that gem. You know, it's like, and so I've learned to be eclectic. You learn from every. I've learned from James White. You know, most of the time I'm listening to him to see what he says about textual criticism. But you know, he has quite a lot of very good material on Roman Catholicism. You know, so I'm like, okay, I'll take my hat off to him, and you know, there's many other people who I listen to, and some people who I've learnt the most from. They have no qualifications, and I've actually gone that route where I've purposely not gotten qualifications because I think sometimes it's usually an American thing where people they appeal to scholarship. You know, it's like you have two people standing there. One person will say one thing, the other person will say another thing. And even though the one without the PhD and without the scientific background sounds more credible, has better facts, has a better argument, people just tend to gravitate towards, oh, well, he's got the science degree. You know, and that's what we see with people like Bart Ehrman. They can say the most stupidest things, and people are like, well, it's Bart Ehrman. Maybe we're just all wrong. He's correct, and that they just sort of, to me, putting scholars up on a pedestal like this, that it's almost like throwing your brains out. It's like, okay, I trust him. He's a scholar. And when I listen to the Michael Heiser stuff, that just keeps coming up more and more. I mean, um, Stephen Boyce, I keep forgetting his name lately, actually. Stephen Boyce, he did a program on Enoch. And of course, he went the whole route of fallen angels having sex with humans. And so I guess the disappointing thing is, like, I'm gonna be doing more and more debates and things like that. But one of the disappointing things is, like, I thought, well, I wonder what Donnie thinks of that. I haven't asked Donnie yet, but I typed in, Ken Hovine Nephilim and listened to it, and he was like, well, that's procreation between fallen angels and humans. And I'm like, no, because probably about 15 years ago, this was like, this became an issue between me and a guy in church. So he was, constantly bringing up the Nephilim, and the fallen angels had sex with women, and all this stuff. And I'm like, it's just not true. And so I had to sit down and do studies on this, and got to the point where I was thoroughly convinced against it, but I never really kept the studies in those days. And so it's just, every time I hear it, I'm just like, that's just stupid. It's like, to me, it's like Scientology, it's like Mormonism. But see, the Heiser thing, and I understand, I was there when, Chuck Missler, nearly every video he did. He even did like a whole thing on 24 hours to read the Bible. It was an hour on, sort of go through Genesis and Exodus. He just went through certain big chunks of the Bible, and it took 24 hours for him to do that. But he would constantly go back to the Nephilim. And what I found was that was probably his best selling thing, because people love that sort of mysterious, it's almost like the Dan Brown Da Vinci Code sort of thing. And I think one of the reasons why Bart Ehrman did what he did was he looked at the Da Vinci Code, which he actually wrote an article against and said it's stupid, it's ahistorical, etc. It's good fiction, but it's just, and I actually enjoyed the movie. I think it's a brilliant movie. Be great if they could do a similar type of movie, but with truth um, but I think Bart Ehrman, while he was actually looking at the Da Vinci Code, he went, man, there's money to be made in this sort of Gnostic type of realm of, the Bible's incorrect and all that. And then next thing you know, misquoting Jesus is out, and he's just started this whole, popular level books, and it worked for him. Um, but yeah, to me, you know, when someone's into Dan Brown, I usually say they're being Dan Brown. It's like, when I'm out in the streets and I'm preaching, and someone comes up to me and talks about the Da Vinci Code and Michelangelo and all the rest of it, or even Constantine. He basically wrote the Bible or something, or added to it. It's just like, um, I always just in my mind go, they've been Dan Brown. And so I sort of work from that platform where I'm like, okay, so they've watched the Da Vinci Code or read it or watched a few National Geographic programs where they talk about this sort of ahistorical rubbish. But where was I going with that? So, but yeah, so what I'm seeing more and more is people are being Michael Heiser. And so I'm sort of creating a bit of a platform where I'm like, okay, Michael Heiser, intelligent guy. He's worked for Logos. He has. So what I'm seeing is he has so much influence because he's become like the Bart Ehrman of the Old Testament in a sense. Uh, and but people are yet to call him an absolute heretic. He's staying within the guild and just like. But when I listen to him, I don't find it really anything he's saying edifying. He's usually saying just information, and he's usually belittling orthodox, true doctrine, true Christianity, and just coming up with something little bit spicy and a little bit left field, and it's like out there somewhere, and it's like, oh, yeah, could that be true? And he's like, well, Christians have had it wrong all along. It's if you were like me and you understood the ancient literature of the Jews and the Ugaritic text, you would understand this, but you don't, and so you have to trust in me. And so this is a common ploy. It's like say Bart Ehrman puts himself on that pedestal where, hey, I'm under Metzger. I'm considered like the go-to guru in the world, the main guy, and so I can just sort of say a bunch of stuff, and people will go mad over it. And so if someone without all that you know those credible peer-reviewed journals and books written and speeches made and all, if someone just turned up and said, hey, I think Jesus prayed for a leper out of anger, and I think Codex Beza has the correct reading of it. Just go, whatever, dude. As if Codex Beza is sort of, even James White says it's like the Message Bible or the Living Bible of the early church sort of thing. It's all over the place, and so sometimes it has very good readings, sometimes it has very bad readings, but it's all over the place. And so Bart Ehrman's just like, no, he says it, and everyone's like, wow. And how many articles and books and things have been written just about that? Dan Wallace will do a whole thing on it. Did Jesus pray out of anger? And it's so stupid. And this is what I'm seeing with Heiser. Heiser has this type of guru status, and I'm only just learning about it, discovering about it, and this whole Nephilim thing, which, yeah, like I said, I thoroughly debunked that for myself personally years and years ago, and I constantly read through Genesis chapter 6, going through Jude, going through 2 Peter, and just looking at all these things and taking away the influence um, of other Jewish writings, like Enoch and um, a lot of people just read into it that the sons of God, they're always angels. Well, the Bible's pretty clear about it. In Luke chapter 3, it says Adam is the son of God. I mean, you can tell the Christians are sons of God. We become sons of God. Romans chapter 8, just read through that. You'll see sons of God so many times. And so I'm a son of God. If I'm here with 10 people, we're sons of God. And so how come it's only translated or only defined by these guys as fallen angels? It's just like, and the Nephilim. There's a twisting and a changing of those words. I mean, the men of renown. It's just like they're just heroes of that era. It's like if you had the 300, it's like, wow, they're heroes, sort of thing. And back in that time, men of renown. It's just that they had made a name for themselves, and they were good at what they did, and they became renowned. They were sort of like warriors of that particular period of time. The Nephilim, that's simply, I mean, look at Goliath. He's just simply a big guy. And the whole concept of angels procreating with demons, it's just, this takes a huge leap over lots of scriptures. And that's why when you start getting into the Heiser thing, it's like, it's almost like just creating this narrative to accommodate these types of bizarre readings. And so you can get, he's got this credibility, this scholarly credibility, and he can just say whatever he wants about the text. He can just say, well, in where's he go to? Deuteronomy 32, I think it is. It's where he twists the word of God and he says, no, this other reading's correct. And see, that's the thing. That's what I noticed Chuck Missler doing. He would go through the Old Testament, and he gets to the end of Genesis chapter 5 and it says, then men began to call upon the name of the Lord. And he's like, I'm for the TR, I'm for the King James, I'm for the Masoretic text. But then he's like, Well, this is the first place where I notice there's a mistake in the Bible, and it should go with the Septuagint, and it should go here and then. It's like, okay, where you going with this, Chuck? And he's like, well, it actually says, and then men began to blaspheme the name of the Lord, because they have to make out that, like, oh, it was an evil time. But it says actually men began to call upon the name of the Lord. And so when you put that in context of Genesis 6, it's like, well, there's sons of God. There's people who are calling upon the name of the Lord. They're developing a relationship with God. We see Enoch, he walked with God and was not. He had a relationship with God. And so it's not hard to have a relationship with God in that time. They had Enoch walked with God. That's an amazing thing. And we see that's in Hebrews 11 with the heroes of faith that he's mentioned there for doing that. And so, could the sons of God just be people who had a relationship with God? I know there's usually what seems to get thrown is like, oh, these are the sons of Seth, and all the rest of it. And I guess, um, I've always taken it like the sons of God are people who choose to be sons of God. They choose, and not like a specific lineage. Um, and the thing is, it's like, okay, so these demons had sex with um, with human women, and so that's sort of why God flooded the earth. But when you read context, it's because of man's sin. But then so you got these type of weird, like Alex Jones type reptilian people who were in that era, and they became, I don't know, that these super dudes. But then you have them later on, and it's like I was listening to one program, and they said, well, they actually survived through the flood because, not saying that they were on the ark or anything. I guess that the sex with women has happened again, and what's to stop that from happening again? And so then you bring up the virgin birth. I've had people saying, okay, well, the virgin birth, um, that is, that shows you that it can happen, and it's like, that's God doing that, dude. It doesn't mean an angel can just come down, um, you know, have the correct sperm. You know what I mean? Like even an animal, it doesn't match up with a human. You have to be of the right species. You know what I mean? You have to be of the right kind. And what they just happen to have done that. It's so weird. But and what it does too, it makes the virgin birth almost like nothing, like a bit of a fairy tale. And so, people are just reading into this. It's like with the prayer of Rahab, I think it was prayer of Rahab. No, prayer of Jabez. That's right. It was just one line in scripture where it says, God's going to bless you, blah blah blah, and it started a whole movement. There was churches founded on that. There was hundreds of thousands of people in stadiums like praying this prayer of Jabez, and it's like, um, I guess it must be selling books. And to listen to Stephen Boyce, talk about Enoch, said it shouldn't be in the canon, but and then he just talked about all this stuff basically that he believes, and it's like, well, even though you're saying it should be in the canon, you're really swallowing all this stuff, and you're really following it. I was really disappointed. It was to the point where I was like, I've almost lost hope that he would come back. You know what I mean? Like you sort of sometimes see glimmers of hope, like, oh, maybe he's coming to his senses. He's just the other day he was saying the last 12 verses of Mark, like he had James Snap on and he's chatting about that. And it's like, I'm sort of gravitating towards it that they could be the correct reading. I mean, here's James White, like they're Gnostic. It's written by Gnostics. There's Gnostic readings in there that are dangerous. So you get a Bible, you read it, and it's got dangerous readings. Anyway, so Stephen Boyce is like, saying the opposite things, and this isn't just over a few words. This is over 12 verses. But then he's going the whole Enoch route, and so I guess in a way I haven't been involved with this. I've just been looking at other things, and sometimes these things, I just know there's like a gut feeling. It's like this Heiser thing is going to be so huge, and it's already affecting so many people. And like I could see it with Rob, and I really feel sorry for Rob because he's just gone the whole route of scholars. So he's found, yeah, even when I was listening to the Jonathan Sheffield Bart Ehrman debate, he just wouldn't even listen. While Sheffield was talking, he's like, "Oh, what's he talking about? Oh, who cares?" And then they're just praising Ehrman like, oh, he knows what he's talking about. And I'm listening there, going, "Okay, Ehrman's wrong on that. Oh, that's a really good point by Sheffield. Oh, that's just history by Ehrman. This is," and going through and just regardless of PhDs, regardless of who's more influential or who's um, seemingly on the right side, you got to give and take. But he just had no respect whatsoever for Sheffield. It was just like you were, oh, who's this little kid? Oh, we got him, um, and I think at the end of the day, it's sort of sad to watch, but he has become a Heiserite. He is just swallowing whatever Heiser says and parroting it. And it's almost like seeing a new Christian. I don't know Rob's past, that he was in India and had persecution and things like that. So I don't know. He might have grown up a Christian family or whatever. But it's like became an atheist and then came back or whatever. But it's sort of like this whole thing of like this journey, from when he says, I think it was 2015 or whatever, when he says he became a Christian again, um, that, he sort of says, oh, Hayes has helped me a lot with all this. But when you really get into it, like say to me, someone who is a healthy Christian, someone who's just become a Christian, I mean, if they get right into weird things like, say, the Sabbath, and you just like they're just obsessed with the Sabbath, and they want to get into Ellen G. White. Imagine Ellen G. White was a scholar and had a PhD and all the rest of it. It's like Ellen White, and it's just like this is just rubbish, guys. It's such rubbish, and and you can see it, but it's like it's gonna take a whole bunch of work to lay it all out for these people, especially when they have absolutely no respect for what you're saying. They're just, yeah, they're drinking scotch and got the sunnies on. They're like, yeah, these guys are sort of hillbillies. And so a healthy Christian, someone who becomes born again, usually it's things like evangelism, telling people about the gospel. Um, Usually it's, a life of, praying, witnessing and things like that, and being around other good Christians and hungering for truth. And I'm not saying you shouldn't jump into, what is the Sabbath, or what is, the Elohim, or what is the Nephilim, and what is it, yeah, go down those paths. But the problem is, from what I'm seeing, Rob's just drinking from the wrong wells, and he's just drinking this garbage, and I'm just like, man, you've been Heisered, and um, I just saw that clearly with Stephen Boyce recently. He's been Heisered. He was recommending Heiser's book, um, The Supernatural Realm, and talking about the council and all this stuff. I'm like, no, it's like just it's weirder than Mormonism. It's like Scientology. I mean, if I had a mindset of Scientology, or a mindset of Mormonism, like say I was trying to squeeze the Book of Dianetics into some scripture somewhere where it said, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. It's like, see, you have to renew your mind. You have to go through the Book of Dianetics, and you have to understand that you need the e-meter, and you need to be, shown how to get rid of the aberrations in your brain and be renewed by the truth. I could squeeze any type of cultic thing into any scripture. And that's what I see. And I'm just like, man, these guys are just going down that road, following the scholars, because, anyone who's usually, conservative and, just saying things that are just normal, bog standard doctrinal things about heaven and hell. And, there's Jesus, there's the devil, there's the fallen angels, there's good angels, there's this and that. These guys want to get behind that and get the scoop and get the Dan Brown type of, whoa, that's really cool. And this is like an adventure, sort of thing. But without seeing that the bog standard stuff is so much more of an adventure. You guys are off into fairyland where it's like thinking that you're drinking from pure wells of water where you're drinking muddy water, poison, toxic water, and it's turning you into a zombie. And yeah, and so then I did the Mark Ward video the other day, and Mark Ward's talking about Heiser, and so I started googling a bit about Mark Ward and Heiser, and it's like he was on his Naked Bible podcast, 242, I think it was, and Heiser's got him on, and he's talking about the book, authorized, and these guys are, and see the thing is, I mentioned that there is an ascendancy of a Bible industrial complex where there's this juggernaut that makes billions of dollars, and it's not just the Bibles that are being sold. This was pointed out by Vladimir. It's not just Bibles being sold, but it's also the whole juggernaut that goes behind it. Of like, oh, see, here's all the Greek definitions you ever wanted, and here's all the other definitions, and here's a whole commentary on that thing that you're trying to squeeze into your Bible there, and here's another, and it's just like, I mean, I remember when I first got saved, like, Bible software was pretty reasonable, and Christians were bringing out free stuff all over the internet, online Bible and eSword, and it's like, man, we will just give you everything for free because you can have it. And then Logos has sort of come along and like, it's only $58 to buy this add-on, it's only this much to buy this, and some of the things that you're buying, it's like, man, that's been around for free on the internet for so long. Why can't, I understand some of the things they do bring out for free, but it's like there's so much money to be made in Bibles, online information. These guys are raking it in. And that's the thing. Someone like Mark Ward is paid to stand in front of people and say, King James, it's bad, it's wrong. Usually, if you go that route, you're not going to buy all our scholarly books, and you're not going to buy all our brand new Bibles that contradict each other. So don't be a hillbilly. Come and join us, scholars. And I find with Rob, he seems to have set himself up on a mountaintop, just looking down at people. And even I listened to a bit of a chat the other day between him and Donnie, the guy who moderates this debate. And Donnie was basically saying, Rob, you constantly say that young Earth creationists haven't contributed anything to science. They don't contribute anything to the real world. And so Donnie just brought up a heap of people who are bringing out findings, who are young Earth creationists, scientists, and bringing out findings that are actually influencing the scientific community. And he just wouldn't go there, and I understand, like, there's a bit of a scholar's ploy where it's like, if you're an expert in one field, you can't really be an expert in other fields. But, I think we can have a roundabout understanding and a roundabout knowledge. You don't have to be an expert to have a basic opinion on something. And so, Rob's like, no, I'm not an expert in that field. I can't talk about it. And what I realized was that he is, when I talk to people on the streets, when I talk to atheists, they're usually like that. So I'll start talking about linguistics, and they're like, well, I'm not a linguist, and so I can't go there. I study physics, and so I just only want to talk about physics, and that's all I'm going to talk about. And I'm like, yeah, but what about this simple bit of information that you don't have to have a PhD for? You can just understand it because you're a human being, because you've got rational cognitive abilities. You can look at things and say whether it's black or white. No, don't want to go there, sort of thing. And it's like, it's a blindness. So anyway, I better continue on.
Everything that Nick has just said, here's how I'm going to tackle this. Notice that the title of this debate is The King James Superior to Modern Versions. Now, if you're talking about the underlying text, notice it's not the King James per se. It's the texts that debate each other. You're putting say, for example, the Dead Sea Scrolls in relation to the Masoretic text, or the so-called Textus Receptus, the Byzantine tradition.
That's the so-called Textus Receptus. It's like, See, the reason that he's saying that is because of argumentation that's come about by people like Doug Kudelik and James Wyatt and others with like the so-called Textus Receptus, the so-called, and they just keep parroting this, and then a generation later, people are just saying it. And that he probably doesn't really even know why he's saying the so-called Textus Receptus. The Textus Receptus was named by the Elzevers. And so the Elzevers, it was a family printing business, an uncle and nephew. And in 1524, they did an edition of the Greek, and then in 1533. And so they basically just said in the front that, this is the Textus Receptus. This is the Greek text that is generally agreed to and followed by Christianity. So I would just say to Rob here, where was the alternative in 1633, or in 1533, or in 1733, or in 1830? Where was the alternative? There wasn't any. It was the text that everyone used. So it's just like saying, okay, this is the textbook that all the Australian U12s have to use for their science project. Okay, here's the textbook. So this is the text that we're all receiving. This is the text that's commonly, where this has the common science of the day, and this is what we're all using. That's basically what it's saying. This is we're all agreeing that all the teachers and all the ministers of education and all of every state, they're all saying, okay, that's the one that we're gonna use. And it's, what's wrong with that? So the so-called Textus Receptus, that just comes from people saying like really dumb arguments, like, oh, it was named the Textus Receptus in 1633, so that's in future time from 1611. So how is 1611 based upon the Textus Receptus? That was one of the arguments that I heard when I first become a TR KJV person. I was just like, that is so dumb, and because that other texts were retroactively named the Textus Receptus. And people make much ado about the name Textus Receptus. So basically, from 1514, the first printed, the Complutensian Polyglot, then you got the editions, 5 editions of Erasmus, then you got 4 editions of Stephanus, and you got the 9 editions of Beza. Then you got the King James itself, which is its own Textus Receptus. It departs from Beza slightly. But then you've got the Elzevers. So all of those texts are basically called the TR. And there's even a whole bunch of other ones made in between them. There's just about 100 different ones. But they're all basically around about, like TR texts and agree with the Textus Receptus. And so where is this other text? And when they say, okay, this is a received text, received by all, it's like, well, yeah. When you go and you look at, there was obviously, the text was constantly, worked upon, cleaned up, and it got to the point where, the King James guys, they nailed it. People were still doing Greek editions, the Elzevers and things like that. It's like, okay, well, that's great, but the King James guys nailed it. That was it. It was like, that's it. And so the underlying text of a King James is the Textus Receptus. So the so-called Textus Receptus, that was one of the arguments against it. Also, it's like, James White's like, received by who? And it's like everyone, everyone who was basically a Christian, Protestant Christian of that era, either read a Bible based upon the Textus Receptus, or they read the Greek Textus Receptus. There was no alternative. The alternative was the Roman Catholic Latin, which amazingly is way more closer to the TR than the Westcott and Hort text. And so that's just one little thing, just one little matter, the so-called Textus Receptus, and it's just the received text. It's like saying the King James is the Textus Receptus for English-speaking people. Like if I was to say, like, what's a thing that's universal? Like, say, as a popular thing, Game of Thrones, and I'm one of those people who's never watched a whole episode. But I looked at it and I was like, oh, yeah, whatever. I think it was a dragon breathing fire. Someone wanted me to see that, melting everyone. It was like, okay, well that's cool. But I just don't have the time. I wish I had the time to watch all all that stuff. I just don't. But at the end of the day, Game of Thrones would probably be put into different languages, so other people, German-speaking people, French, and they can enjoy that too. And so if I had a DVD set of that and I gave it to them, that would be the Textus Receptus of Game of Thrones. Or let's make it less controversial, like Star Wars. It's like, okay, here's the Textus Receptus of stuff. This is all agreed to, that we've all agreed these are the ones. Now there's stuff outside. Some people have made a few little Star Wars things here and there, but they're not like canonical in a sense. It's like um, what's been agreed on. That's the TR. And so what's wrong with saying that? Imagine I said, "Oh, the so-called Star Wars series." So yeah, the so-called Star Wars series that people received. So, but didn't they? So anyway, I won't belabor that anymore. But I might actually go back a tiny bit.
And so on,
If I can,
with respect to, say, the Alexandrian tradition and all that.
I have to.
So my issue here is the
rewind
King
back.
James translation itself. Notice it's not the King James per se. It's the texts that debate each other. You
Okay, so he's saying, the title of it is the King James only controversy. Is the King James version superior to modern versions? It's like, okay, it's only, we probably only should be dealing with the King James and the NIV and putting them next to each other. And it's like, okay, but there is a reason why there's these readings. And so that's one of the reasons why, I went back and behind all that. If we're just going to go, talk about readability or something like Mark Ward would, and never really touch on the text, it's like, well, you're only getting half of the picture there. There's the full picture. The King James is a continuation of the proper text, where the modern versions. Where was any Bible before 1881? Where was any Bible that was like what Westcott and Hall produced? It just simply didn't exist because they created it. It's their creation. And so, these guys are, oh, the so-called received text. So, well, where was your Bible, guys? Where was your Bible in the Reformation? It's just not there. So that's why we're like, why are you arguing about whether it's received by people or not? Anyway, won't go on.
You're putting say, for example, the Dead Sea Scrolls in relation to the Masoretic text, or the so-called Textus Receptus, the Byzantine tradition and so on, with respect to, say, the Alexandrian tradition and all that. So my issue here is the King James translation itself. Is the King James superior? Now, you might be thinking, well...
See, Rob probably didn't know my position. I think he just sort of jumped into this debate and maybe watched a little bit of what I'd said in the days leading up to it, but I don't think he really prepared much for it. But at the end of the day, my position is that the King James is a TR edition. So basically, you had the Complutensian Polyglot, which basically was the first TR edition, has the Comma Johannium in it. Erasmus, in his first editions, he didn't have it, but then after a few editions, in his third edition, he put it in, and it's remained in there ever since. And so that would probably be the main controversial, like, oh, is that in or out or whatever. It's in 95% of the Latin manuscripts. It is slim in the Greek, but we know the internal evidence basically shows that it has to be there. The grammatical issues, and I do a video on this if you look at 1 John 5:7 and Georgios Babiniotis. It's in my video list there. If you watch that, you'll understand all about the internal evidence, or not all about it. It's just a slight little snippet of it, but it's enough to say, yeah, the people have included that because they understand the solecism that's there if you don't have that verse in. And so um, yeah, is the King James superior? So that's what he's asking. I might just go back a tiny bit because I've sort of forgotten I've forgotten what I was going to say. This will trigger it.
So my issue here is the King James translation itself. Is the King James superior? Now, you might be thinking, well, hang on, the King James, uses these texts. In this case, the Textus Receptus and all that. But the irony is that the King James actually mistranslates some of the Textus Receptus Greek.
Okay, so he makes that claim. And the irony is, so I guess, like, just looking at Rob knows nothing about this. He knows absolutely nothing. He's just sort of like, oh, I thought we are just going to be going to the King James. He's going into Greek and Hebrew and history and Reformation and talking about all this other stuff, Byzantine text, and um, and he's like, well, can't we separate those two? Can't we have, the King James actually, mistranslates the TR anyway, sort of thing. And it's like, after a while, I actually felt sorry for Rob, being involved in this level of discussion where he sort of just knows he's going to lose. It seems like what I really encourage people to do, like Rob looks like he's dove deep into some things. Like apparently he's a physicist, so yeah, he would know that science. He would understand that. Now he believes in evolution. He has a whole bunch of other stuff that he believes, and so um, I'm pretty sure he believes everyone in the end is going to be saved, and so um, yeah, obviously that's a rejection of hell and things like that. So he's diving down the wrong holes. Let me just say that. But one thing I do encourage people to do is to do that in the right way, where you become it. There's an old saying. I think it was Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin. I can't remember. You become a jack of all trades, but master of one. And so, what I found with this issue, if you want to know about textual issues and you want to know about the Bible completely, dive into something that's microscopic but deep. And so that's what I did with Easter. I just kept going down this Easter. Every time I would grab a book, I would be looking through and seeing if it's got information about Easter. And that opened up to, okay, well, the Lord's Supper, and that opened up to the resurrection, and that opened up, and some of these themes are huge. Like the resurrection is a huge theme. The blood of Jesus is a huge theme. But I'm always grabbing things and trying to relate it to something, to a fulcrum, to something that's pointing in a direction of Easter. And so I was always Easter, Easter, Easter. And that's why, I'll debate anyone in the world on Easter and win hands down. I just know it. Because I just know that subject very well. Now, there's other subjects I don't know very well. And that's the same with all of us. But I think we've got to be a jack of all. We've got to understand the basics of things um, and um, dive into one area also. So it's a bit like if you're a carpenter, you might have your particular thing where you can put in windows very well or something like that. But there's going to come times when you've put in all the windows. What are you going to do now? You're going to stand around. No, you're going to learn other skills and other things, and yes, build on that, work on that one thing, but become a jack of all trades. Understanding all different aspects, but become a master of one thing. And I've found this, helps just in general life, but I always recommend for people who are studying into textual criticism, King James issue, TR issues, to dive into just one topic and something that they enjoy too. I think just getting into something that you don't enjoy is just torture. Um, and I find this, it's so much easier to teach kids things when they actually enjoy what they're doing. So, like say, if I was to be teaching someone how to read and how to count and how to do things, and they really loved surfing, they might love surfing or skateboarding or something like that. You relate things to that, so it's like, okay, so you might get a surfing magazine now. Let's read about your favorite surfer. They want to read that article. They're not like, reading, Chaucer or something like that, and they've got no interest in it. I remember when I got a guitar lesson once, and the guys, I'm playing Aura Lee, it's like dun, dun, like Love Me Tender sort of thing, and I don't even know that song. Like if he'd actually just played like a song that I knew, like back in the '80s or whatever, whenever I had that lesson, I would have probably gone, yeah, I'll come back for more. But it was just like I'm learning this thing and just soon forgot it because I don't know the song. And if there's already a song that they know, it makes so much different. What you're doing is you're exciting in them. Um, you're just basically throwing fuel on the fire, or that's already there. And so with Bible study, and especially with studying textual criticism, because it can be quite dry and boring and all the rest of it. Um, find a theme. It might even be, there's some big themes out there that, like, I dive right into Revelation 16:5, and it's like, okay, that's what I'm going to go straight into that. Now, the one that I'm getting into at the moment is the last 6 verses of Revelation, so I'm trying to understand absolutely everything about that I can, and that might take years. It might be 5 years down the track. I'm like, wow, I've got a full good picture of that. I'm going to do a book on that. Hopefully that would happen earlier. I mean, but in the meanwhile, every time I see an article on it, I'm listening to it, and it's something that I enjoy looking at. Um, and I guess in the same way that people, get turned on by the Da Vinci Code thing, or even the Heiser, pseudo Scientology rubbish, Mormon rubbish that he's spewing. It's like I understand why people get into things and learning, but they're learning the wrong stuff. When you're learning truth and you're getting rid of the rotten stuff, it's just so much more edifying and so much opens up in the scripture. I'd say with the whole thing, Revelation 16:5, that opened up the whole Old Testament for me. It opened up the whole thing of Jehovah, the name of Jehovah. It was just like, wow, that opened just right up. And then it's like later on, it's like Nehemiah Gordon's doing all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm in agreement with this guy. But then I realize he's doing a few things backwards. It's like, well, not really, but we sort of coming to the same conclusion. But he's getting there a different way, and some of his ways it's not really that good. But it's like, okay. Um, and then it opened up the Book of Revelation to me. And also looking at some of these beings in the Book of Revelation. Like I know these guys are talking about divine council and all that sort of stuff, and I'm like, well, 124 elders, and then it's like, this angel said this, and Jesus said he was and is to come, and when they mention the name of Jehovah, then this happens, and when they mention Pantocrator, this happens, and so how's this related, and how does this relate to dispensational understanding, and so it was a great study to do. I really enjoyed it, and even still, every now and then I'll just jump into that, and it sometimes it's good to actually have a break, come back, and new things just come up. And so, jack of all trades, master of one. You might be like, well, what can I get into? And I'm still doing the Easter thing, because I'm trying to write a book on it and just compile as much information as I can. But it might be a verse. It might just be a verse, and especially, I'm talking about the textual criticism issue, how to defend the Bible. Like say 1 Timothy chapter 3 verse 16, where it says God was manifest in the flesh, or He appeared in the body. That would be a good one to jump into. What are you jealous of? The deity of Christ, the Trinity. Some people, it's like you can't even sneeze without someone saying, "Hang on, you've just you're a modalist. You've said something against the Trinity. So, oh, sorry, I'm still trying to figure out things, and it's like, if that's your passion, get into that. Trinitarian verses that are destroyed. Um, Even like Luke chapter 2, verse 22, and the whole concept of their purification, her purification. Why was it changed like that? And um, yeah, and some people, they love to get into the whole era of King James. How was the King James version translated? What are the differences between that and the Bishop's Bible? Anyway, so I'm sort of rabbit trailing, but if you want some ideas, if you want to help me do some of these studies, I mean, that would be really cool too, because sometimes I'll get into things for a while, and if I don't continue on, it just stays there dormant. But if other people, and what I found with the Easter thing, I was constantly pushing it, and then after a while, some people were getting it, or they'd already gotten it from KJV Today or Will Kinney or some other people. And then they're adding things, and the whole concept of where it says the Jews' Passover. I mean, why would you say it's the Jews' Passover in the Gospels? Obviously, the audience that they're writing it to, the Greek audience, because they're writing in Greek, they're explaining this is the Jews' Passover, or the Jews' Pascha, I should say, where they had the Christian Pascha. So and that lines up perfectly with the early church writers. So jumping online and debating these things, and I've started groups of, like, even 1 John 5:7. There's so much in 1 John 5:7. Um, and to understand that, I think I could debate anyone about that verse and come out of a debate with people saying, I can totally understand why King James Version TR people see that is a genuine reading. And I think that it's just because people don't understand. They're only hearing Dan Wallace and James White and a few other people just say, no, it's not in there. Elijah Hickson, it's not in the Greek, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, let's just continue.
Now, I'm also not specifically, as everyone who follows my YouTube channel and what I write, I'm actually a more Old Testament type guy. And so what I'll do is I'll quickly just summarize, for example, my good friend Michael Heiser in his FAQ on his work with Lexham.
So we can see straight away he's appealing to scholarship. He's like, okay, so Michael Heiser's figured it out. I don't really have to figure it out that much. I just read Michael Heiser, and what he says is gospel. And so that's why, I was mentioning before, it's like, Mark Ward, Stephen Boyce, Rob Rowe. I'm just seeing person after person like talking Heiser. It's like, and I've been going through the Naked Bible podcast, and I'm just cringing, going, oh no. And this guy, he's just throwing about concepts like, who knows if Daniel was written in that era? We don't know. And I can't remember if it was exactly that, but it was something like that. And he's just throwing things out there that usually you're hearing in, Richie Carrier would say something like that, and he's just not at the end saying, yeah, throw the Bible at. He said, yeah, follow me on my podcast. Yeah, follow Jesus. Anyway, so we see Rob's appealing to Heiser here,
where he claims, and it's actually true, the interlinear that everyone uses, the King James interlinear with respect to the Old and New Testament, the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament Greek, he's the only one who's digitized, by hand, hyperlinked literally every word, every letter with respect to, if you want to talk about King James Strongs or any other lexical sort of corroboration. And he himself says, look, I'm arguably the only person in the world who's literally been through every syllable of the Masoretic text, comparing it to the King James translation. I know the King James and its relationship to the original languages very well. Why did I do this? It was part of my job at Logos Bible Software. I'm the guy who created our King James reverse interlinear. And then just to skip down to...
Okay, so he's saying he's a scholarly guy. He's the one who put the Strong's numbers, onto the King James version in Logos. I mean, I remember before Logos, there was a Bible program that had already done that. And I mean, if you go to Bible Hub, you can see that they've all coded it. Um, I've done it on my website, not in the Hebrew, but in the Greek and in the English. And so I might actually just jump on there. Oops. I'll turn my computer off instead of pressing escape. Good job. Okay, so let's go to tr.org.au. And I'd love to show you that Greens one. I do have another one. This one. Sorry, Harry stirs. You're on the ground. So this one here, this is Greens. Now this is in 1996. And so he's coded every Strong's number to the Greek and put an interlinear there. So, I mean, does it take that much to go through and copy this in to the computer? I mean, if you're there and you already have the Greek text, I mean, you could probably even go, let's just copy it into a notepad or a Word document, replace, everywhere the word Kai is, which is just and, with, 2532 at the beginning of it, and go ding, and it would replace it all. And you might just have to go through and capitalize a little bit. And how do I know that? Because I've done it. That's how I did it. You know what I mean? And you go through, and there's some words in the Greek that never change. They basically, unless it's at the beginning of a sentence, might be capitalized, and so you can go through and do large chunks like that of just, that's right, that word appears sort of everywhere, or just the definite article 3588. Just go through, put that in front of it, go replace, bang, it's done to hundreds and hundreds of words. And so, but it's still, this is a pretty big book. There's a lot of doing that, and so let's have a look at what I've done here. Let's jump down to say Matthew. Okay, so every word is coded 976. So if you go over, now there's sometimes it comes up in red. Most of the earlier books in the New Testament are all, we call them blued, because they've been blued. It links somewhere. If it's red, it means it hasn't linked to anywhere yet. So, but basically, Heiser's coded them, put the Strong's numbers there, but we've also gone, okay, the book, Vivlos. Okay, Vivlos, primitive root, noun, nominative, singular, feminine. In the authorized version, book, it appears 13 times as book. And then we can read through, what that means, where it appears, the English basic etymology and definition of it, a Hebrew equivalent, some other interesting things that people might want to look at concerning that, where it appears in the King James Version, how it appears in some of the pre 1611 Bibles, Bishop's Bible, etc., down through to the Textus Receptus, how the Textus Receptus has it, Matthew 1, Vivlos, Vivlu, Vivlus, Vivlo, some other languages that could probably be expanded, but it's just a basic, the book and Libro and things like that. And then see also, so we've got, you can go through everywhere that this word book appears in the King James Version, and so and some of these are coded to the Strongs as well. So we're going through them where where they're written down, we've copied the Strong's numbers in there, so that obviously it hasn't all been done in this one. We've still got a few that are just black here, but it's getting to the point where eventually that will be all coded as well. But we can see here a couple of ones that are red. So the odd one here, that means we just don't have a definition, but it's still coded to the Strongs, which is what Heiser did. So we they're talking about, you're an expert. Well, thanks, Rob. You think I'm a world expert for doing that. And not only have I done it there, let's just jump into, so that's the English. Let's jump down the page where I have, the Textus Scrivener. And I'm also going through and putting it into Beza's as well. Look, we've done all the Greek as well. So if, Vivlos Genesios Jesu Christo, you are David, you are Abraham Genesin ton Isaac, Isaac de Genesin ton Jacob, Jacob de Genesin ton Judas kai tois Adelphos afdu. So what's Adelphos? Okay, it's brethren. Let's click on that. Number 80. Adelphos from number 1, which is alpha, which as a connective particle, and Delphos, the womb. Quite interesting. AV, brethren, 226, brother, 113 times, brothers, 6, brothers, way, 1. And so that goes through it. And so then we can see scriptures containing 80. So this has been done to, this is an ongoing thing. So obviously, I've gone up to Matthew 5 with copying and pasting. And so I'll show you exactly how I do it. So you have Abraham there is number 11. And so, so Abraham begat Isaac, Isaac begat Jacob. And so here it has brethren, and I put these little bits of code there that make it go bold and underlined, so it's easier to see in the text. Brethren, when you're doing a Bible study, brother, and you can see what the King James has. So after I've put in all that and what the King James has, then I'll be able to put the 2016 in there and my one. Then I'll be able to put, some of them I've actually already done that just as a bit of a test. So say like a parallel. Actually, I've got the Scrivener, and B's a parallel here in the Greek. So basically, here we go. You can see exactly what Beza has. So this isn't just copied from somewhere. This is me going through Beza's, making sure every letter, every little jot and tittle, or every breathing mark is identical to what Beza had. And sometimes that can be hard because, say Chi can be in a different character. And so you can have Chi 3 times in a sentence, and there's 3 different characters, but it always equals Chi, and so we know what it means. And there's also the Latin that we can check, and there's also the King James, which is pretty much absolutely identical to the 1598. So we can go through and go, okay, which TR? And we're going through and going, it's the same, it's the same, it's the same, it's the same, it's the same. And so we might look at, say, verse, the verse here, Ozion or Hozion. Wow, big deal. And so let me just zoom in there. But this is the sort of thing where they're like, all the TRs they're apparently different. It's like, do a study into it. See the breathing mark? You've got a rough breathing mark or a smooth breathing mark. Ozion or Hozion. So it's Hozion or Ozion. And so this these are the types of differences in the 190 list of Scrivener and Beza. But I've gone through and put all, if you clicked on that, you can go to the meaning there. And so if he's saying that Heiser is like one of the go-to gurus in the world, he's the main guy, and Heiser's saying that about himself. So I'm just playing the fool here and just being like, okay, well, I've done this. And I've actually done it, and I'm comparing the Greek and I'm comparing English. I can go, actually that didn't click on, there we go. And I've also put the definitions there, where it's coming from and the scriptures that contain that. And so I would be considered the guru of the New Testament text. Why isn't Rob looking up to me? Do you think Rob would, subscribe to my channel or chat to me and say, hey, apparently you're the guy because you've done the same thing as Heiser, and not many people have done that. And so, as if he would, if I had PhD, if I was on the critical text side, basically, and jump through the hoops to get to guru status, that might happen. So I've got the 1900 and 2016 parallel, 1611 and 1900 parallel, which is quite interesting. The book of the generation of Jesus Christ. And so I've underlined where there's differences. So you don't have to blur your eyes or anything. It's just got an extra E on it. Abraham begat Isaac, Abraham begat Isaac, Isaac begat Jacob, and Jacob, the Yaakov, and so Judas, David, and even just the U and the V, which are basically interchangeable. I've pointed that out too, or else people get upset. They're like, you haven't done that. It's interesting, some of the earlier 1611 italics, the wife of Urias in the 1900 edition, the wife of Urias in the 2016 edition. And so, yeah, that just shows you where the changes are, where the italics are, where the 1900 has more italics than the 1611. So it's quite interesting. But you can read through that and see exactly where, there's changes. I mean, just reading through Matthew chapter 1, it's like there's hardly anything. A few little spelling changes here and there. But I've done that with the 1611. I've done, coded it. Let's have a look. So I coded book of the generation of years. So I had to make sure that was the word in the King James, and then I put that to it, and then I've coded it to when you click on Jesus or Jesus, however you want to pronounce that in 1611, and it goes to here, Jesus. Jehovah is salvation, and so I guess with what Rob's saying about Heiser's praising of himself, he should also see me as a guru. You know what I mean? But he won't, because I'm the hillbilly KJV onlyist who is only there for scorn. But let's continue.
What he has to then say, his sort of like his reaction to it. He goes, so it does deserve its reputation as a quality rendering of the original languages. However, I'll never trust it again in Job. Job is filled with weird things, such as words that are still uncertain in meaning.
Okay, so then he's like, okay, Heiser doesn't trust it in Job. And so it was interesting the other day that Mark Ward said, I've only ever said that there was one mistake in Job in the King James. But then he's like promoting the ESV, promoting the NIV. How can you have, read through the NIV and read through the King James and not go, well, one of them's wrong here? Sometimes it says the opposite thing. Sometimes it says, I'll bless you. The other one says, I'll curse you. And it's like, oh, he's only found one mistake anyway.
Since they occur only once and nowhere else in Hebrew, and that must be translated by appeal to related cognate languages. Ugaritic.
So that's exactly what Mark Ward said the other day about the Ugaritic and the cognate languages and things like that. But the King James translators, they knew the Semitic languages. And the difference is they knew them fluently. They weren't just coding things like a programmer, like an ASP or PHP programmer. You just code things and then you're an expert at web design or something. No, you code things and that helps, with computer programming. That doesn't make you an expert on a language. And so what makes you an expert on a language is your ability to speak it, to communicate in it, to fluently know when someone says a word, you know what that word means. When they say it in a sentence, you can understand the context. But I don't know anyone in the academy who can do that, except for people who are born in Greece and or in Israel can speak those languages.
has a special role in that process. Ugaritic
So he's plugging the Ugaritic there.
is ancient Syria. And then down here he goes.
And so what you see is, like, say, Theodore Beza, he was contemporary with Tremellius. So Tremellius, the first Bible had been done they did the Ethiopic Bible in 1548, and then they brought out the Syriac Bible in 1555 by the same guys. And so then it was in 1569 that Tremellius did his Syriac Bible with Hebrew lettering, because he found that if he kept it in Syriac letters, they were like, "What's this?" But if you actually put it in the letters of the Hebrew language, people could read it and could go through it and could examine it. So this is like one of Beza's best friends. Him and another guy called Janius. There was Janius. He was an expert in Arabic. So these are the Semitic languages, and these Semitic languages were. They helped with understanding words. They helped with understanding different concepts. And so this is before the King James. When you get to the King James translators, there were guys, experts in Persian. There's experts in lots of different languages. And so, the Ugaritic. The Ugaritic is only just thrown up there as, you have to know this one to really understand the Bible, just because pretty much. And this is not a concrete either, but pretty much the Ugaritic findings were not known to the King James guys. But and so then it's like, well, they didn't have the Dead Sea Scrolls, so let's just focus in on that and see they didn't have that, and so this reading and that reading, and they just focus in on that, So it's like a bit of a gotcha sort of moment.
There were many words in the Ugaritic tablets discovered in the late 1920s that are consonantal equivalents to typical words in the Hebrew Old Testament. So the King James translators had no access to that, nor did they have access to other cognate languages for the same purposes.
So he just said, and they didn't have access to other cognate languages for the same purposes, but they did. I mean, just look at their testimonies of who they were. I mean, look at Lancelot Andrewes. He spoke 15 European languages, and he also spoke 6 ancient languages. When you go through Miles Smith, many other guys, they were writing dictionaries in Arabic. They were majoring in Persian and reviving these languages in Europe. And so you've got some of the best linguists of that era. And so, of course, they're interested in the cognate languages. So, see, the thing is, these guys knew Hebrew fluently. And so, to know Hebrew fluently and then to look at the cognate languages, you understand why there's certain words and why there's certain structures and why things are being said as they are. When you know Hebrew to the point where you can click on a Strong's number on Logos and pronounce it, pronounce it with a American, like, that's Bereshit, it's Hashemayim and the Elohim, and they're trying to get the whole thing happening, and it's like, Hebrews are just like rolling their eyes going, oh my gosh. But when you only can do that, when you can't actually fluently talk in these languages or fluently read these languages, when these languages aren't known to you like your own language, then it's of little worth to know cognate languages. It doesn't help you. It's sort of like knowing French and German, but you can speak a tiny bit of English. So you imagine if I was here like, today I like English language. I like to read it. What help is knowing German words and French words? So I'm going to get heaps of things wrong. I've got to be fluent in that language if I'm going to be an expert in it. And that's the thing. Most of the people in the academy, they don't know these languages. They claim they do. I mean, I talked to the main translator of the NASB 2020 edition, and I said, so yeah, what is your fluency level in Greek? And he said, none. He said, that's not how we do it. You know, he was rebuking me, basically saying that it's ridiculous to think that people have to be fluent in these languages to understand them and to know them. I'm like, okay, so like you put that in any other context, put that into English, put that into German. Like imagine I turned up to Germany and I'm gonna write the history of Germany from their documents and everything, and I can't speak German. But they'd just laugh at me. It's like that would be the number one job description: speak German. But see, now it's like, oh, I've done a year or two of Greek. I can click on a Strong's number on the Logos Bible program. I can click on the thing and it says it in Greek, and then I can say it to my friends. You know, it's like, what about being fluent? Um, and the thing is, people who are linguists, I mean, you wouldn't just be an expert. I'm an expert in Anglo-Saxon. I know Anglo-Saxon really well. No, you would be an expert in English, then you would find your way back to that language. It's like you wouldn't be an expert in, um, say, the Urdu language of Pakistan, um, or sorry, you wouldn't be an expert in Sanskrit if you didn't know your basic Urdu or basic Punjabi and the other languages surrounding that. You would have to sort of know those things. You would probably just go, okay, let's get a native and we'll teach him Sanskrit, rather than some foreigner who has to learn all these other ones and then get down to it. And see, that's the thing. These guys are proclaiming that they're experts, proclaiming that they're fluent. Um, like someone like Bart Ehrman, if he was to be transported back to the year, 50, and he was to stand in front of a Greek church, they would just look at him and he wouldn't be able to communicate. Neither would Dan Wallace. Neither would any of these guys. They'd be twanging away in their Erasmian twang. And it's like, but they wouldn't be able to string sentences together, and it would take them a while. They don't know these languages. Just, I've gone through enough of their videos to go, does this guy know what he's saying? And they're like, okay, it says in the Greek here, and then they're like, Google Translate, like, Elohim, and they don't know the languages fluently. They in any era, ancient, modern, and so that's why they're like, well, you know, NASB, the main guy of the NASB is like, well, you don't have to be fluent. It's like, oh, okay, sorry, I just thought that would be a normal prerequisite to doing this. You would have to be fluent.
like Akkadian or the Dead Sea Scrolls. They did the best they could and did it well. But in books like Job, and I would go beyond Heise and say practically everywhere, it is easy for someone like me to know they're just simply guessing in places. I also saw many.
Heise just puts himself on this pedestal. It's so easy for someone like me, who's the guru, to know where they're just guessing. King James guys, as brilliant as they are, they did what they could, but many times they're just guessing. And it's, and I listened to a bit of Heise, talking about this, and I think it was on a YouTube thing. And he didn't really go into the specifics of it. It was just like, look, I don't really want to go into the King James issue. It's dumb. There's mistakes in the Bible everywhere, and it's not really their fault. They just don't know what it's sort of thing. And it's like, no, be specific. Show us exactly where. That maybe there are places where they show us, but Rob doesn't just show us exactly where in Job this mistake is or these mistakes are, and neither did Mark Ward for that matter.
Many places where one translator, the King James committee was, the KJV committee was it was a committee that made the translation, knew his Hebrew Aramaic grammar than another guy, and hence did a better job. But I'm
okay. So he's saying one guy knew his Hebrew better than another guy, and it's like he has no idea about the whole reason why the King James is so good. And like I've explained in many other videos, and I'll do it again here, if we have 60 translators, you got 6 companies, you got 10 in each company. All 10 are to do, they're to have the bishop's Bible, but they are to go to the originals when the bishop's Bible, seems to depart, that they're to exalt the original over the reading of the bishop's Bible. And so that's, they're going back to the text of Beza, but they've also amended their own text and they've made their own underlying text, which departs from Beza in about 20 translatable differences. So you imagine 10 people in that group all doing their translation. Then they're to bring it all together. Like say they're in Westminster, they're to bring it all together, and then they're all to amalgamate those 10 into one specific translation. Okay, so that's the first step. Well, it's probably step 10, but it's like that's the first thing I want to bring across is you're sitting there with people like Henry Saville and Lancelot Andrews and John Boyce. John Boyce read the Bible at the age of 5 in Hebrew. He's totally fluent. He was fluent in Greek. Many times they would get together and only talk in Greek. They were copying the Byzantine Academy that Erasmus was a part of. And so they were doing this in Hebrew as well. So experts in these languages. And so they're sitting around. So you're imagine if I was back then and I was speaking fluent Hebrew, and I'm there with Lancelot Andrews, who knows Hebrew, and I'm there with Henry Saville, who used to teach the Queen of England Greek, and he knows a whole bunch of other languages. He might know Hebrew fluently, but many times we're still discovering a lot of stuff about the King James translated. Sometimes it's like, okay, this Greek expert in France, he was considered the Greek expert of that whole era. And then we find out, they got him in at the end of the King James to help with the text. And this French guy, we didn't even know about. It's only just come out recently. And so finding out more and more and more about the King James, that of their superiority as linguists, as people who knew these languages of the Greek, Aramaic, and Hebrew. So you got the 10 guys. They've all done their personal text. Then they're bringing that and amalgamating that into one text. So they're sitting around saying, no, the reason why this is translated that way is because of this and because of that. So even if there's 3 guys who speak fluent Hebrew in one place, and the other guys they might be speaking Latin and Dutch and a whole bunch of other languages, Spanish. So they've got all those Bibles out too. They're looking at how historically this has gone through as well. This is why the King James Bible is so great, because they were doing this. And then they come to a conclusion. Then they send that one amalgamated 10 copies, amalgamated all into one, off to the other 5 companies, and all the other 50 guys read it, and they send back, we think this, we think that, this is a good thing. So how can he say, you can see where one guy knew the Hebrew better than the other guy and translated it in such a way? It's like, well, hang on, how can that have happened? Because they had all these cross references, and that just wouldn't have happened. And so basically, for Heiser to say this shows me that Heiser doesn't know about the construction of the King James text. And I'm not saying this from a King James only perspective, TR perspective, or, I guess I am, but it's like, I could be someone who's just written a book, like when you go through some of these, King James books, secular books, like say, Power and Glory. This was God's Secretaries, I think in America. They just named it differently here in Australia. But this is by Adam Nicholson. And he goes through and explains some of this stuff. Just from a secular, worldly point of view. And he's like, there's sort of like nothing else that's been done like this. This Bible is like, you probably don't have a collection of scholars like this in any age, in any time, who have gotten together and produced something so amazing and so powerful. And so these are secular guys saying this, because one minute they'll say that, and then they'll try to get all saucy and, oh, the royal family, they were all just sleeping around, and King James was a pedophile. They just say whatever comes to their head. It's all false. But they have to, at time, to have a book about something, you have certain facts, and most secular people acknowledge how the King James has been translated, and they're like, this is amazing. Heiser doesn't seem to know that. And just by what he's saying here, it's like one guy knew the Hebrew better than the other guy. Okay. You have to be much more specific than that. If you can show me where that occurred, then I can look at the Hebrew. Then I can also go back through all the translations that led up to the King James. Then we can go through other language Bibles. When we can go through the Latin, we can go through the even the Septuagint and things like that. We can go through all these translations and look at these, and we can create a case for it. Not just, I'm Heiser, I put numbers on the end of Greek words and Hebrew words, and so I'm an expert, and I saw a place where one guy knew Hebrew better than the other guy. It's like, no, that's not how it was done. It was done by committee. So they're talking about this. They're thinking about this. They're writing to other people, even outside of the 60. They're writing to other people, experts, and even like it's proven they got this guy in from France who was the world leading expert in Greek to get him in, and he was talking about the Apocrypha and things like that because they translated that as well. And it's like these guys were experts in all that. And so I just don't believe what Heiser's saying here. And the more and more I go along, Heiser is probably going to be mentioned by me quite a lot the next few years. I can just sense it. He's just popping up everywhere, and I'm like, the council, the spiritual council thing, the whole Book of Enoch thing, the Elohim, the extra gods, the fallen gods, and then trying to get mythology and squeeze it into the scriptures. And I can just hear from what Rob's saying. I've watched a few of his videos, and I'm like, man, my heart goes out to the guy. He's been totally deceived. I would just say that I wouldn't say that Rob's a Christian at all, and I'm just saying that just from a concerned place. I would say, and I'm not condemning the guy. I would say if Rob watches this, which he might do, I would say, Rob, what you really need to do is you need to get back to the basics. Start reading the New Testament. Get yourself a good Bible. Read the New Testament 10 times more than you do the Old. And do what they did in the book of Acts. Do what Jesus did. And I think if you occupy your time for a year or two doing that, you'll free yourself from all this other rubbish. So it's like, okay, what did Jesus do? Okay, Jesus, a third of Jesus' ministry was healing the sick. A third of Jesus' ministry was casting out demons. A third of Jesus' ministry was preaching the gospel. Go and preach the gospel. Go and visit people in hospitals. Go and just do normal Christian things. You'll find this will liberate you. This whole Heiser thing and the Elohim, this is just going to be, it's just puffing up with pride, and it's not even true. Like that's the thing. It's like watching someone who's like a Seventh-day Adventist saying, Ellen G. White said this about the scapegoat theology, and you don't know about that, but if you really did read into the magical writings of Ellen G. White, you would know, the hidden secrets of God, and you would know about the first chapter of Ezekiel, and you'd know it. And it's just like, man, just read about what it is to be a Christian in the New Testament. Become transformed by the renewing of your mind by going through the New Testament constantly, then reading the Old Testament through the eyes, not of the cultures around Israel, but of the eyes of the New Testament. That's how we're supposed to read the Bible. And so that's how the early church would have read the Bible. The Greeks, they would have got the New Testament and gone, okay, as it was delivered to them by Paul, and eventually it became the full New Testament. They would have looked back at the Old Testament because they would have known about those things, but they weren't like the Jews who just had it drummed into them, and knew about it and all the stories, and it's their culture. And then they had to, from a New Testament perspective, look back at what the Hebrews said and go, oh, that's interesting, because a lot of it's redundant. A lot of the Old Testament is totally redundant. It's for the Jews. It's for things like tithing, things like the temple. They're gone. They're fulfilled in Christ. So we can understand them and go back. And it's like even the whole concept of you go to church and God comes down. That's old covenant. We have Christ in us. Jesus lives inside of us, and he comes out of us in love, in compassion, in preaching, in healing, in whatever Jesus did, and so whatever the disciples did in the book of Acts. So that's part of who we become. We become like Christ. Now you might understand some of those concepts, but I'm just saying that, like, I'm just not. I'm just seeing you go down this route, and I don't want to just say, hey, I don't think you're not a Christian, and not give you the keys to go, look, you can get out of this situation. I would say, read the Bible, New Testament, 10 times more than you do the Old, until you get out of this mindset. I'm not saying forever. You need to become a New Testament Christian. Jesus said to the guys who were going to throw rocks at him, he said, whose disciples are you? We're Moses' disciples. See, they didn't want to be recognized as Jesus' disciple. We're Moses' disciple. And then they want to pick up stones and kill him and things like that. And it's like, and saying he's a blasphemer. And you can have an old covenant mindset. You can have an Old Testament mindset, and not really know the truth of the New Testament. And also stay away from, this would be a second thing. Like, just say you met me in the street. I'm preaching and you said, Nick, I really want you to help me. I'm involved in all this Heiser stuff. I'd say, look, just drop it for a while. Drop all that for a while and just start going through the simplicity of the new covenant. You really need to become a New Testament Christian. You're sort of thinking, oh, the New Testament's just so boring. The Old Testament, that's where all the juicy things are. And that eventually, when you get to the New Testament, you can twist it this way because of the Old Testament, and you've got to read it in that way to twist it. And it's like, you got to understand a lot of cultures were accepting Christianity without really even knowing a lot about the Old Testament. And so I think you've got to become like that in a sense, where you're just reading the New Testament on face value. You're going, because I know you're doing your study through Mark. But it's like, okay, I'm reading into Mark this. I'm reading into, 1 Corinthians chapter 11, the covering over people's head is someone's genitals. It's like, I heard that the other day and I was like, man, it's just getting weirder and weirder. I mean, I've looked into Scientology, I've looked into Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, Roman Catholicism, lots of different cults, Christadelphians, and Heiser stuff is up there with some of the weirdest stuff, but it's orthodox because it's Lexum and it's Logos and it's the Trinity, and we're defending that. And it's like, to me, it's just bizarre, it's weird, and I don't see good fruit coming from it. So anyway, I'm just being totally honest with you. Don't want to, be all, hey, we're all brothers and we're all this and all that. And I'm not into all that. I'll just tell you exactly the truth. If you get offended by it, well, that's up to you.
I'm digressing. I like the King James, and the reason I wanted to do the reverse engineer is because he, in a nutshell, he basically grew up on the King James. And me, myself, when I became a Christian, I have British heritage. I have this big, fat KJV. It's sort of like also even a picture book. Absolutely magnificent. The King James Bible is a testament to passages like in Ephesians 2 and 3, where there's this promise that God's wisdom will forever be in this thing we call the church, this new anthropos, this new humanity that will, the church will survive through and through and through. And then by the time you reach, say, the King James, it's a testament to God's providence throughout the first 1600 years. But then the 1600 years since shows that God's providence has been still active, even more so.
I was going to pull him up on that, so it's been 400 years since, but slip of the tongue.
And so then he goes, just to conclude what Heiser says, the above should also inform you that I have little, actually no time for the KJV debate. I taught bibliology and the history of the Bible in Bible college. And then he goes that...
So because Heiser's taught the Bible in the college, he has no time for the debate. It's like, I've got time for anything, and the thing is, what I find is these people are absolutely ignorant of the debate. They just know someone said it's really dumb, it's really stupid, stay away from it, they're cultists, they're hillbillies, and so that they get this idea about it. But when you challenge them and say, okay, so did you read this article? Did you look this up? Yeah, and that's what I find even with this debate. I'm constantly like, well, have you read the KJV Today article on this? And you should read my website on that. And you should, and that's where, when people who oppose us say things like, say, James White, we've all got his book and we're going through it and we're talking about it, saying, okay, well, he says here this and that. And we're examining those things. We seem to know more about what the Academy is saying than sometimes people like Gary and Hickson. I mean, just listen to the recent podcasts by Jeff Riddle. If you type in jeffriddle.net, you'll get there, or Stylos with Jeff Riddle in Google, you'll get there. And so just go through some of his latest YouTube stuff, and he's talking about how Jeff Riddle and Peter Gurry and Elijah Hickson had pulled him up about talking about certain things about what the Academy think and what they believe, and about going back to the original text or going back to this and that. And he's flattened them. He's proven that they're wrong. And you can only just look at it and go, well, I don't think they know that much. Just because they have scholar over them, just because they're there with this ancient manuscript showing you, this letter and this is a Greek letter here, and just because they look like they're playing, the part of the scholar doesn't mean they're a scholar. And that's one of the things is when you run into people who are the gurus, and you run into them and you ask them basic questions, and it's not like they're just a wealth of information they can go bang, bang, bang and just help you. They just get angry. And it's like, why would you be angry about me asking that? Or, I remember the Bible Society guys in Papua New Guinea come from New Zealand, and I asked them a few basic questions about Erasmus, and they just got angry. And I was like, okay, not from a learned perspective, where I've looked into that. I know your side, and I know this other side. Here's my educated perspective. It's just like, we don't even think about those sort of things. And so I would also, when it comes to the textual issue, I would encourage Rob to just go, okay, I'm going to put this Heiser stuff down for 6 months, and I'm going to read through every article of Will Kinney. I'm going to read through every article of KJV Today website, and I'm going to go through Nick's website and just look up, things as they come up. I would recommend you do that. And you'll see that pretty much all of these things have been answered. Yeah, they're just constantly regurgitated, but it's like, go through Jeff Riddle's Word magazine, or it's in audio. You can go through that. Go through Taylor DeSoto's material. That's probably more talking about presuppositions and Yeah, and some of these guys, all those guys I mentioned, are Calvinists. I'm not a Calvinist, and so, but I do on this issue. I'm like, look at these guys. Just look at the facts and the stats and the figures, and you should be satisfied with what they've said. Anyway.
That people defending the KJV as the best translation, or that it's an inspired English translation, or that other English translations are heretical. They are all lame arguments. Not only are they...
Okay, so this is still Heiser. They're all lame arguments. And that's because what they teach is all the Bibles are wrong. All the Bibles have errors. There's no perfectly preserved Bible anywhere. And so we have a smorgasbord of Bibles, and they're all good. Just ask Mark Ward. They're all good, and Heiser would say the same thing. Pick the ESV, or if you like, pick this one. The best Bible is the Bible you read. It's like, oh, man. No, the best Bible is the one that's the most accurate. And the one that's akin to the original readings. That's the best Bible.
Lame, but this is really a New Testament debate, hence coming back to my starting point.
Well, not really. It's a New Testament debate when you're looking at the Greek, because it's been made that by Westcott and Hort. But there are issues in the Hebrew, and it's because people now are going, okay, we've got the Masoretic text, but let's go to the Targums, let's go to Midrash interpretation, let's go to like Heiser, Ugaritic stuff, and it always seems to usurp the Masoretic text. It's never like the Masoretic text can correct these other things. It's just always Septuagint reading. Yep, we'll go through Proverbs, and if we have a different reading, we'll just go with the Septuagint. And it's like, why? And that was one of the questions I asked in the debate. Why did they do that? Why would you consider, okay, this reading, I've read it in the Septuagint, that sounds better, I'm going to go with it. How many checks and balances did you go through before you threw the word of God out and replaced it with something else, even though it's ancient? Are you sure it's not a mistake? Are you sure it's not a mistranslation? Are you sure it's not a bias that's been put in there by someone? And so, all of these things, the Dead Sea Scrolls, it usurps this, and yeah.
None of the arguments, so here's the point though, none of the arguments for the KJV only view work at all when it comes to the Old Testament and the history of the transmission of the Hebrew text.
Absolutely they do. We're just advocating for an accurate text. We're advocating that God preserved his word, and we go through and understand that his word was preserved through the Masoretic text. We understand that there is a Greek Septuagint filled with errors. If you want Methuselah living 14 years after the flood, if you want, so basically the Septuagint, King James only people, and this surprises me when I talk to people. I'm like, well, we don't believe in a wholesale Septuagint. People are like, you don't believe anything was translated into Greek at all? And it's like, well, I never said that. A wholesale Septuagint, from Genesis to Malachi Septuagint, like it's like they believe that got made like 250 years before Jesus. Here's the Greek Bible, and it's like everyone gets a copy, sort of thing, and Jesus was reading from it, and it's preaching Hebrew and quoting the Greek Bible. It's like, and the disciples were reading from it. Like, oh, we're all doing this Greek thing apparently that's not mentioned in the scriptures anyway, and the Septuagint, the original concept of it is that it was only the first 5 books of Moses. So, okay, where did these other ones come from, and when were they done? And so the thing is, some parts of the Old Testament could have been done into Greek. That's not an impossibility, and a lot of TR, KJV people go, yeah, that could have been done. But then it comes down to dating. How are they dating the Dead Sea Scrolls? We've seen the fudging of dates with lots of different manuscripts. I mean, especially when you're getting to that age. I mean, how do they know it's not, how can they specifically 100% know that some of those manuscripts weren't put there after Christ? You know what I'm saying? And so this is where, it's what I'm saying is we all take that by faith. It's the guys who are into the paleography. Many times they're just going by the shape of letters and things like that, and that's from this age and that's from that age. But sometimes if you've got nothing to compare it to, it's like, well, let's push it back to this age. And I'm not saying it couldn't be that old, but I'm saying, well, are we 100% sure? And we're not. It could be older. It could, yeah. Some people are like, oh, well, we're pretty sure that this Greek manuscript is before Christ, but we're not sure, so we'll sort of just put it around that time. And it could be 100 years later, it could be 200 years later. And you listen to the scholars talk about it, and it's like, they're not giving me that much confidence that they're like, yes, we just found this irrefutable proof that that should be there. And we just know that scholars make massive mistakes. I mean, just Google archaic Mark. Archaic Mark was basically the Gospel of Mark that the aliens talked about a lot, and this was considered like the missing link between Codex Vaticanus and Westcott and Hort sort of thing, because it was a Byzantine text that had readings of Vaticanus in it. So people were like, "Wow, look at this! This is amazing! This is incredible! We've found this. We thought that Vaticanus wasn't used or at all, but here it is. We have this one." And the thing is, it was proven to be a fake in 2013. They tested it, scientifically tested it, has Prussian blue ink. And so that's modern ink. It's a fake. And then they found, I think it was beforehand, this is what made them suspect. They found a book that basically it was copied from a printed book. So they could tell that where the lines ended and everything and the pages ended. It was like, this is identical. So it's a fake. And so this is one of the things. I mean, I'm always open to things, but it's like I'm always open to things can be faked. That they believe that this was a 13th century manuscript and it was only recent. And so this is how wrong they can be. And so I understand the Dead Sea Scrolls is like, the Rolls Royce of manuscript finds, and it's like, well, what do we really know about it? And sometimes the more we know about things, the less confident we become in the dating methods or whether some things are genuine. Could there be fakes there? Has that ever been put on the table? So this is one of the things. It's like, I know like Stephen Avery, and I've helped him with this project about looking at if Sinaiticus is fake, and he's dead certain it's fake. I lean towards that, but I'm like, okay, let's just continue to bring the evidence. Let's not just pronounce it as a fake. Let's where I was doing that. Now I'm like, okay, I just want to keep compiling the evidence. We're not there yet. Where Stephen, he knows a lot more about it than me, so he's like, well, I've seen enough evidence that it's a fake, and I went through and I collated Sirach in the Greek and the introduction, and so basically I put Sinaiticus and the Moscow text of 1821 side by side, so that they could be examined and looked at, and so anyone who knows more about it than I do, they don't have to do that homework. It's sort of like all the donkey work's been done for them, and they can go through and check and see. Yeah, and it was interesting. Some words that were left out, and it's like, well, it's left out in both of those because it was considered that Simonides in 1839, he basically made that text from the Moscow Bible of 1821, and so the Greek Bible. So anyway, where was I going with that? Yeah, so it comes down to dating, comes down to all that. So the whole thing about the Septuagint is we believe that the Septuagint is the Septuagint that we have in our hands today. There's no the Septuagint, it's Septuagints. There's sort of like, well, this guy's version of it and this guy's version of it. So it's not like the Textus Receptus, and I know that which TR, or, tiny little crumbs of differences. But most people are like, okay, the Textus Scrivener, because that's the one that's basically Theodore Beza's text with about 20 translatable differences to the King James. Okay, so Masoretic text, I mean, I've got it sitting here on my desk. It's holding up my computer, so I can't hold it up. Well, maybe I can. So this is considered the Masoretic text, and so I've got the J. Green's one in the Interlinear Bible. And it's interesting, J. Green, he numbered all the words too, but I guess he's one of the leading Greek and Hebrew experts in the world because he did that, according to Heiser. But the Septuagint, for me, when the early church, the Jewish guys, Paul, he was with Barnabas and he was with other people. He went preaching in all these Greek churches, whether he had a translator or whether he was speaking it. And I think maybe he got better and better. But what happened was they all started getting letters of Paul. They started getting Gospels and all the rest of it. And they started compiling their Bible, the New Testament. And then they're like, well, we want that story from the Old Testament. So they started working on the Old Testament. And, with these Jewish guys constantly visiting and John and other guys, they're like, they can go through and do a translation. So I believe that the wholesale Septuagint was done after Christ. It's not an unreasonable thing to think that. It's just, and so then what happened was there were different copies of this going around. And so then eventually in Origen's Hexapla, in the fifth column of Origen's Hexapla, that was the definitive LXX. That was sort of amalgamated from a bunch of attempts. I guess it's like, the King James of, Bishops, Geneva, a whole bunch of others, and it's amalgamated. But the thing is, people were testifying that the Greek was very accurate to the Hebrew of those days, where nowadays it's not. It's departed from it. It's very departed from the Hebrew, and so they know that the text has been perverted, it's been twisted, it's been mistranslated. It's basically not the same text as what they had back then, and so what I believe has happened, and what I believe I can prove this, is that when they're writing the Old Testament, like just say you're living in the year 200, and you're like, well, we've got our Old Testament here that some guys made for us. They knew Paul and they knew John, and so we've got this here. And then they're looking at the Hebrew. There's probably Latin translations around, and there's a whole bunch of language translations. But they're looking at the Greek New Testament, and they've got a Greek Old Testament, and they're like, hang on, I can copy from the New Testament into the Old that exact saying that's in Psalms, from Hebrews, and just copy it and paste it straight in, because I know that the New Testament's accurate, and that's what we see is a copying and pasting of the New Testament verses into this Greek. So years later, people get this Greek and they're like, wow, I think Jesus used this. It's exactly the same. You see what I mean? It's been reverse engineered, copied and pasted from the New Testament into the Old. And it's not hard to think that happened. It can be easily proven that actually happened, because at times, like say in Hebrews 11:27, I think it is, that was copied and pasted into Genesis chapter 47 when it should have been Genesis chapter 48. A very similar scenario, but if you want to know more about that, I can talk about it. But it's that's what I believe happened, and to me that makes sense. So when people scowl because I'm like, well, I don't believe there was a wholesale Septuagint before Christ, they're like, oh, it's because they're just told this simplistic Disney story of this, and the whole thing about the 72 translators, 6 from each tribe, and well, only the Levites were to work on the word of God. So why have you got 6 from each tribe? They would be going against God. And then they all came out with the same thing. This 72 number, it just gets thrown around as like a number of perfection. Anyway, let's continue.
Yeah, basically dead on arrival. But KJV only people usually don't get into Hebrew, but this is also... Wait, I'll just put that off. But this is also a digression. If you love the KJV, read it. It's as good or better than anything out there. All right, so that being...
So, KJV only people don't get into Hebrew. Okay, so what about Albert Hemd? Albert Hemd, he's living in Jerusalem. He's working for the Trinitarian Bible Society. He's working on Hebrew literature. He can give you a phone call, speak fluent modern Hebrew to you, and explain ancient Hebrew. I mean, works for the Trinitarian Bible Society. They only have the King James, so it's like you would throw him in the bag of King James only because TR, all these other guys just get thrown in the same bag. So it's just not true. What Heiser's is saying is not true, and this is why Mark Ward just parrots it and other people. It's simply untrue. So you're quoting Heiser there, but it's like I'm just going through going wrong, 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 wrong. It's not real. It's not reality. And I find that with most of Heiser's stuff, it's like, he's all over the place.
Said, what I'll do is I'll quickly share a few little... How much time do I have left, Donnie?
You've got exactly 8 minutes, Rob.
All right, so I'll just rush through this. This is just me spitballing. But
okay, so, oops. Oh, that's fine. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop it there. It's good that it actually changed picture there so I can remember exactly where I've got to go with this. I'm going to stop it there because I've been about 2 hours, and Rob's going to probably bring up a whole bunch of issues. I'm not sure exactly what he's bringing up. I've forgotten, but I'll leave that for next time. So that'll be in video 3. But thanks for joining us, guys. I might just check and see if there is any interaction in the chat. Okay, so Chase Dow says, "Hey Nick." B Separate says, "Blessings," and I kind of like Heiser's Old Testament Trinity Godhead stuff, but that's about it. And so that'd be interesting. Maybe you can send me a link to that because I want to understand the good, the bad, the ugly about everyone. And so, yeah, it's interesting because I've heard Rob say things like, "Let us create man in our image," where he's like, okay, that's not Trinitarian. That's to do with the council, the angels, and all that. Where it's like, yeah, for me, it was settled a very long time ago that God alone created the heaven and the earth. God alone was the creator there. When he created the angels, they all shouted for joy. Because of an evolutionary mindset, people think that Satan was created a long time before man, and then man was, put on the earth. But I believe that Satan and man were basically created around the same time. And I also believe that Satan's sin and Eve's temptation happened at the same time, which is what I say, not unorthodox, conventional, but I believe it's easily proven. I mean, why would God have this angel Lucifer? The Bible says Lucifer was an anointed cherub in the Garden of Eden. He was basically like a protecting angel. And Lucifer, he tempted Eve. Now, when that happened, you notice that in Genesis chapter 3, he wasn't cursed before that. God said to the woman, what's happened, and said to the man, what's happened, and they, you'll have trouble in childbearing, and man, you're gonna, the sweat of your brow, you'll go, and all that. And then it's like, okay, on your belly you will go, and he'll, bruise your head, you'll bruise his heel. However it goes, can't remember. That's bad. There should be a memory scripture. But that he was cursed then. It wasn't like, oh, there was this cursed thing. And it says he was more subtle, and I'm saying that correctly. I've had a few people correct me and go, it's subtle. It's like, no, it's a different word. It's from the French. Subtle actually means very deceptive and very crafty, where subtle is not the same word. And so, you know, everything might be nice and subtle where you are, but it's different. So I deliberately say subtle because that's how it's spelt in the King James, and that's how when you do a study of the etymology of that word, you end up going, it should be pronounced like that. And so we've sort of got subtle there, but then people think it's means something else. So I guess Mark Ward will probably watch this and go, oh, another false friend, and blah blah blah. But it just sort of means that he was crafty, he was deceptive, and yes, and he wasn't cursed. He wasn't cursed yet, and so that's one of the things that I think people have this evolutionary mindset where God creates the heaven and the earth in on day two, he or day three or whatever, he created something, and it said it wasn't good. No, it doesn't say it wasn't good. Where it says, and he saw everything and it was good, and that the evening and the morning were the fourth day, and all this. There's one day there where it doesn't say that. People like, see, that's when Satan was made, and the birds of the air, that means, the angels, and they fell that day. And it's like, no, because at the end it says it was all good. And so my understanding is that Satan fell the day that he tempted Eve. That was his actual first sin. He is a liar from the beginning. He is a murderer from the beginning. And so that's where I don't have a full demonology chart to go, okay, well, when did the other third of the angels fall, and etc. But I do know that I can't, now that I understand that the fall of Satan and the fall of man happened at the same time. I can understand. I can't read scripture without seeing that everywhere and just seeing that fit in. And the more I look at it, the more I'm solidified in that position, which I've had for probably about 15 years. When I went to the United States, I went and visited Joseph Chambers, who's an interesting guy. He was one of the guys who appeared in the Ankerberg debate, the one where Gip's like, oh, you can only read the Bible in English, you can't read it in Russian, and etc. And it's like, people all cringe at that, and they say, oh, that's what turned them off to, King James Bible. And it's like, if one guy can turn you off a King James Bible, it's like you weren't very strong in it. And you don't have to be on his side. You can say he's an idiot too. So, he says some good things, some bad things. But anyway, so Gail Ripley was supposed to be on that program, but she refused. So Joseph Chambers sort of filled in. He didn't really say that much. You watch it all the way through, and he brings up a few good points. But anyway, basically, I went and visited him, went to his church, visited his son, and his son had written a very good article entitled "When Did Satan Fall?" So if you go to paulcreek.org, you can go to their website. If you probably typed in paulcreek.org in commas and then typed in "When Did Satan Fall?", you'd get that article. And I read through that and I was like, wow, that's a really interesting understanding. And it was also basically talking about the omniscience of God, and did God know that the fall was going to happen, or was it just all orchestrated? And that comes directly against Calvinism, Reformed theology. So the article is quite against Reformed concepts, but it just triggered a bunch of thoughts in my mind, and I started going down that route. Now, I really don't know that much about what Leighton Flowers teaches, or who's the other guy? James White's debated him just recently, and he's written a book on Adam, and I should really know his name. So these guys have become very famous in like the last 10 years, where I listen to their debates and I'm just bored to tears straight away. I think because I don't agree with them, I've sort of figured out my own theology, which really, when you get down to it, people agree with, but it's just because there are traditional things. They're like, I'm agreeing with you, but it's painful. It's like I know I've been there, but I'm just trying to get the Word of God and 100% what the Word of God says without um, you know outside influence. Um, yeah. So Terence Chambers, that was his name, the guy who wrote that article, and I don't agree with everything that he said, but it just triggered thoughts that made me think in a certain way and made me look at the fall of man in a certain way and also the fall of Satan, which is quite interesting. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I'll continue this series whenever I get time. Um, and obviously, we're only a short way through it. We're like half an hour through it. And how long does it go for? It goes for 3 hours. And so we're going to be here forever. Stay a while. Stay forever. Thanks, guys. God bless you. And we'll leave it there.
But since
Okay. Live streaming. In stream.